A Herbert Hammy and Friends Adventure, starring Herbert Hammy, Milton Fox Esquire, Bill Hammyson, Alice as the Mermaid, Sid the Donkey, and guest starring Granny Hammy as the Mummy. It was far too hot to be carrying all this junk, thought Sid as he munched at a patch of sparse grass on the floor of the canyon. He was making use of the limited shade from two small, weedy-looking trees whilst they had stopped for lunch. Sid ran the Grand Canyon Donkey Dash tours and had happily accepted this booking, expecting to carry nothing more than the normal picnic basket and maybe a blanket or two. Seen it as an easy day, guiding the hike and a bit of waffling about the local history, but these jokers, it seemed, had packed everything. Their bags weighed a ton, and Sid was sure he'd spotted a microwave. Just where did they expect to plug it in the middle of nowhere, he grumbled to himself, whilst enjoying a cool, quenching mouthful of water from the river. Meanwhile, Bill had stopped eating to take out his video camera yet again. It wasn't one of the snazzy modern digital cameras, but one that required video cassettes. It didn't matter to him that the sound was slightly out. It lacked any stability, nor that it needed several old-fangled machines that loudly clunked and whirred to play them. No, it was the retro aesthetic that drew him to it. It wasn't that it was a far cheaper option, honest. This time he was using it to capture a prehistoric tooth that he had spotted on the stone-littered bank of the Colorado River. It was grey and very sharp-looking, and had almost perfectly blended into its surroundings. Bill only noticed it after it gave him a sharp poke in the paw. Bill yelled to the others to come and look at what he had found, but they were far too interested in their lunch to move. In shock as he watched Milton lift a huge fish sandwich up to his beak. Herbert, who had momentarily pulled himself away from his own food, said, "Oh, my giddy Aunt Milton, you aren't going to eat all of that, are you?" Milton Fox just grinned and flicked the gigantic sarnie up into the air with his wing, opened his beak and swallowed it whole, then let out a satisfied yum. The others looked on in total shock. Bill finally said, "You are going to be so bloated all afternoon after that." Milton just shrugged in response. Herbert then asked him if he'd ever chewed his food, like a civilized chap, to which Milton replied, "That's cheeky coming from the Hammy who's just polished off 6 packets of peanuts in under 3 minutes. If Herbert had a fault, it was his addiction to peanuts. He could eat them from morning to night, and Bill had even caught him sleep-eating them once. Herbert was a tad eccentric, it was true. Take today, for example. He had opted to wear a top hat hiking, claiming it to be the perfect thing to keep the sun off his nose. And unlike the others who were content in plastic picnic wear, he had insisted that his beloved peanut pudding needed to be eaten only from a heart-patterned bowl. "It's traditional," he had said. Bill looked at his friends and then at his meagre lunch of a piece of seed cake and sighed to himself. This diet was hard enough without Herbert looking up and proclaiming to the world in general that he loves peanut pudding. Bill looked at his friends and then at his meagre lunch of a piece of seed cake and sighed to himself. This diet was hard enough without Herbert looking up and proclaiming to the world in general that he loves peanut pudding. Bill reminded himself as he took a small bite, trying to make it last, that it was worth the sacrifice if it helped him run the upcoming marathon. However, secretly he longed to have a spoonful of that pudding, as it did indeed look yummy. Finally the trio finished their lunch and filled their now far lighter bags with the rubbish, making sure that they did not litter this amazing landscape. Bill then asked Sid if it would be possible to take a detour, so that he could capture the landscape from on top of the rocks that had been carved through by glaciers to create the Grand Canyon. Sid thought quickly and saw a way to grab himself an afternoon siesta in the shade rather than lug all their stuff any further. He said, "Yes, of course, but you will need to cross the river and follow the path to the top. Sadly, I can't join you as I have forgotten my water wings. It's such a shame as it's such a good view from up there." He then added, "Tell you what, I will wait here and keep an eye on all your stuff for you." The gang agreed and set off on what was to be an adventure, leaving behind the now far more cheerful Sid. They had been walking for about 20 minutes and still hadn't located a safe spot to cross. Milton was a strong swimmer, but the other two preferred to paddle. Suddenly, as they were debating to give it up as a lost cause, Milton dived into the river with a huge splash and swam off. "What's up with him?" asked Herbert. "Not a clue," replied Bill with a shrug. They stood and watched their friend with interest, then realized that he was now towing something after him. "What on earth are you going to do with that?" asked Herbert, looking down at the old wooden barrel with a barely hanging on label bearing the image of a pink pig and Percy Pig's pink soda. Milton said, "Stop fussing, Herbert, and jump on. You too, Bill. I'm going to tow you both across the river on it." Milton said, "Stop fussing, Herbert, and jump on. You too, Bill. I am going to tow you both across the river on it." Herbert still looked distrustfully at the barrel, but then Bill, who had already jumped astride the bobbing cask, pulled his friend onto with a grunt. As soon as Herbert's bottom sat on top of Percy's face, Milton took off like a speedboat and tugged them after him. It was working well until they got stuck in a cross-current, caused by a drain pumping out water into the river. Bill exclaimed, "Why on earth is there a drain out here in the middle of nowhere?" But no one could think of a good reason. Milton was unable to break out of the current, so they decided to go with it until they could spot a good place to hop off and continue their journey on foot and Flipper. They drifted in the water with Milton splashing around and enjoying himself, until they saw that the mound of rocks ahead of them had someone sitting on it. In fact, it wasn't someone at all, but a mermaid, or a merhammy to be precise. She was holding up a golden acorn that glistened in the sunlight, whilst beckoning them to come closer to her. She was singing, "Come and see my acorn of gold. If you're good, I may let you hold. Come close and my nut do behold. Come, friends, join me and never get old." Excited with anticipation at the wonders being offered, the three began to get closer, as her voice sang melodically and enticingly. However, it has to be said that the merhammy's charms were not as strong when it came to Milton. He guessed, looking back later, that it must have been down to her being a hairy hammy, not a sleek penguin like himself. The only thing that interested him was that gigantic fishtail, and how he could imagine it in a sandwich. It was a good job that Milton was not as under her spell as the two hammies, and that he was easily distracted from the silver-tongued river siren by the very yummy-looking but helpful fish leaping in and out of the water, just in time to realize that they were warning them that they were in great danger, that it was a trap, and that she must not be trusted. Milton summoned up all the energy that he could muster and took off away from the merhammy as fast as he could swim, towing two lovelorn-looking hammies behind him. He could hear them moaning and groaning about the fact that they had been dragged away, when there was that golden nut to look at. They had wanted to know why Milton had torn them away so quickly and rudely. Milton did not reply until he had finally spotted a bank quite a distance away from her. When they had alighted onto the solid ground, he turned to the two still whiny hammies and explained to them what had happened. It took a full 10 minutes for her charms to finally wear off, and 4 repeated explanations of the whole charade before Bill and Herbert truly understood. Finally they thanked their brave friend and admired his ability to resist the very tempting fish snack. Milton grumbled to himself loud enough for all to hear that he couldn't believe his friends thought he'd choose a snack over them. However, as they all set off again, his good mood returned, boosted by a quick sardine snack. They struggled up the bank and saw a path up the canyon side. Bill said, "I'm not sure that this is the path Sid meant, but it will do. Otherwise we won't get back in time for Herbert's 5 p.m. peanut snack." "Very funny," said Herbert, but he and Milton agreed that it was probably for the best, so they set off along the winding path. "Look at this," said Herbert, as they came to a rickety old sign with a pointy arrow nailed to it. It had been crudely painted and warned them that a mummy lived in the vicinity. The two Hammys looked at each other, thinking whether this trip could get any stranger. Then Milton laughed. "What's up with you two? You know it's probably just a Halloween experience. We have a lot of them here. You know, like a haunted mansion or a ghoulish gallery," chuckled Milton. "Come on, there's nothing to worry about. Seriously, I can't believe you two believe in mummies. There's no such thing." And he kept on giggling to himself as they walked on. Bill and Herbert explained to their friend that Halloween wasn't as big a thing back in England, and listened as they set off again towards what looked like a cave in the canyon's wall. To Milton's tales about going to haunted pumpkin patches and the glorious thing that was trick-and-treating. "I don't like this place," said Bill as they got closer to the cave. "It's just a cave, Bill," chortled Herbert. "Nothing's going to jump out and get you." Herbert spoke too soon, for as the words left his mouth, a mummy popped out of the darkness of the cave and said, "Well, hello! Can I offer you boys a cup of coffee or maybe a bit of bunt?" "What's a bunt?" Herbert asked Milton in a whisper, his mind once more on his tummy. "It's a type of cake," whispered back Milton, who was looking pale. "I say," said Herbert, "these haunted experiences are fun. I could squeeze in a cake, but do you have tea?" Milton looked at his friend in disbelief and tugged at his arm and whispered, "Herbert, it's not a haunted experience. That's a real mummy." However, Herbert just laughed. Milton looked pleadingly at Bill to help him get through to Herbert, who was now about to step into the cave. "No," yelled Bill, and raced forwards, grabbing his mate. He was quickly followed by Milton, who grabbed the other arm, and between them they dragged the now grumpy Herbert away from the mummy's clutches. Herbert was struggling and not cooperating in the slightest. "Pack it in, you twit," said Bill. "It's a real mummy, you know, the ones which eat your brains." "I don't care, I just want to take bunk cake," replied Herbert. Herbert finally got the point and started to run with the other two away from the cave. Once a safe distance away, and seeing that the mummy had disappeared back inside her cave and hadn't chased them, Milton looked up and said, "Oh well, now we know why there was a drain running into the river. It's from the mummy's sink. Can't be having dirty cups and plates for visitors." And with that he collapsed laughing at his not funny joke. "I am beginning to have enough of this hike," exclaimed Milton as he got himself back together, and they started wearily making their way along the path which went over the entrance of the cave. "Me too," exclaimed Bill, trying to dodge and swerve yet another cactus. "Oh, come on, it's been a blast," said Herbert, who had paused to get his breath back. Unthinkingly, though, he decided to sit on what he had thought was a big round cushion. In his defence, it did look round like one of his granny's puffets back home, and in the bright sunlight you couldn't see all the sharp spines poking out. "Ouch!" yelled Herbert, tears running down his face. "This cushion's just stuck my bottom full of needles." The other two looked at him and laughed and laughed. It was only his pained expression in the end that brought them out of their revelry. They painstakingly pulled out each needle from his rear end, which was a very long process given Herbert's large derriere. Finally they set off again, climbing up to the top of the canyon. On reaching the top, they had to admit that it had been worth the journey. "It sure does look amazing from up here," said Bill as he gazed down. Then he realized that he had not filmed any of their adventure. Who would believe them about the Hammy or the mummy without proof, he had sighed. "Never mind, Bill. At least you can capture this moment," said Milton. "I would," replied Bill, "but I got water in the cassette compartment and now the tape's ruined." "You mean we came all this way for you to film and you're not going to?" exclaimed Herbert, a tad grumpily. He was still a little testy following the cactus encounter. Bill looked sadly at his paws and nodded. "Don't worry, Bill. You can use my camera to capture it," smiled Milton. After Bill had used the far superior camera to capture the gorgeous scenery and they had eaten a small snack, their talk turned to their returning back to Sid and their stuff. Bill turned to Milton and said to his friend, "It's been fun, but I really hope the journey back is less eventual." Herbert finished a huge bite of another bowl of peanut pudding he'd hidden on himself somewhere, looked at his friends and said, "I reckon Sid has gone back by now. Milton, why don't you call us a taxi and let's go home and have some supper." The end. This story was drawn and written using StoryCube prompts and a series of requests made by Sylvia, aka Tabertooth. She chose a draw of 19 story dice, which are detailed next, and asked that the story be set in the magnificent Grand Canyon. She also wanted the story to involve hiking alongside the Colorado River and asked that Milton Fox, Herbert Hammy, Bill Hammyson and a donkey also be included in the tale. I hope that you enjoyed the story and the final drawing. Linz.